Hi kids, my name is Dr. Jeff Day, and I'm with Texas Tech University's chess program located here in Lubbock, Texas. And today, in this very short video, I'm going to share some tips with you that I think will help you score better on the UIL exam. In order to make this a bit easier for you, I'd like to take you to a live chessboard. So give me a moment so I can share my screen with you. Welcome back, and welcome to my chessboard. The first thing that we want to cover is something called algebraic notation. Algebraic notation is nothing more than the way that we describe how a piece moves from one square to another. In chess, we have something called files, and we have something called ranks. Each of the files are identified with a letter, and each of the ranks are identified with a number. As you might imagine, there are squares then that can be identified by what file it is on and what rank it is on. We merge the number and the letter that identifies the file and the rank in order to identify a square. Let me give you a better example. If you come down here to the board, I'm going to move this pawn 2 squares. And you'll notice if you look at my mouse, chess.com has automatically done the chess notation for me. This move is identified as E4. But why is that? How do we know that it's the letter E? And how do we know that it's the number 4? What is E and what is 4? Okay, I want you to watch my mouse, and I'm going to come down here to the lower left-hand corner of the board, and I've just highlighted the rook. More importantly, though, I want you to pay attention to the letter that's underneath the rook and the number that's to the side of the rook. In this particular case, the letter is A and the number is 1. That square is identified as A1. If we were to go 1 square over, would that be A2 or would that be 1? Let's take a look. You'll notice now I've highlighted 1 piece over, and the letter directly underneath the piece is now B. It's no longer A, but the number of the row is still 1. This square is called B1. So why is this square, which I've highlighted in red for you, why is this square called E4? Well, let's figure that out. If we come down here, take a look at my mouse, A, B, C, D, E. That pawn is on the E file. All of the letters at the bottom of the board identify files. So this, as an example, I'm going to highlight all of them for you so you can see. All of those squares are in the A file. All of these squares are in the H file. And we know that because if we look right underneath the row, you'll see the letter H. All of those squares are in the H file. Files, as you probably are noticing now, run up and down. That's what the E stands for. It's the E file. Notice how this pawn is in the E file. That's why the letter E, if you take a look at my mouse, appears right here. But what about why does the number 4 appear? Okay, well, let's solve that. If we come back over here, we'll notice the the number 1. There's number 2, number 3, here's my mouse, number 4. This is called a rank. Files move up and down. Ranks move side to side. This is the 4th rank, and we know that because here's the number 4. Well, what about this? What rank is this? Can you take a look at the board and guess? Well, here's a hint. Right here is the number 7. This is the 7th rank. Okay, so when we move the pawn here, and it's called E4, it's because it's in the E file, and it's on the 4th rank. Now, it's black's turn to move. Let's say that black does this. Okay, if we come over here, we notice that chess.com has identified that move as E5. Why is it E5? Well, this will be a little easier to understand now. The E stands for the file. This pawn right here is in the E file. And we know that because if we highlight all of the squares, look what letter is sitting right here. The letter E. It's the E file. But where does the 5 come from? Well, if we count the ranks, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that pawn is in the 5th rank. And so if we do a grid, 1, there's the E file. And now we'll bring these over here and we'll take these off. There's the 5th rank, and this is the E file. That's why it's E5. Now, let's say that white does this. Can you guess how we would write that? Well, chess.com is going to help us a little bit. Knight to F3. Even though the word knight begins with the letter K, we don't use the letter K to describe knights. We use the letter N, and you can see that right there. The reason we don't use the letter K for knights is because the king starts with the letter K, and we use the letter K for kings. So, if we're trying to understand notation on this particular move, it says knight to F3. Well, why is that? I have a feeling you are beginning to understand. First, the F stands for the F file. Notice how the knight is now on the F file. And the 3 stands for the rank. 1, 2, 3. That is knight to F3. Let's say that black is going to move now. Well, chess.com is going to help us a bit. It tells us that this move is written down as knight to C6. Let's make sure we understand why that is. First of all, we use the letter N because it describes the knight. Notice the letter C. Why is it the letter C? Well, it's on the C file. Notice how this knight is on the C file. That's why we use the letter C. Well, what about the number 6? I think you know the answer to this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's on the 6th rank, and it's on the C file. So knight to C6. Okay, I think that helps explain algebraic notation. And that's a good thing. That will help you understand how to identify which pieces are being referred to in each of the individual questions. Now, at the top of the video, I said I was going to talk a little bit about some tips that I think will make it a little bit easier for you to score better on the exam. Here's the first tip. Read the question carefully. Yes, I know that sounds awfully easy, but it's still a very important thing to do. Read the question carefully and then read it again. You want to make sure that you totally understand what it is that you're looking for when you look at the position. By reading the question carefully, you will be able to better identify what the problem is trying to, or how the problem can be solved, or what the right answer is. Okay, number 2, it's very important to make sure that you understand the difference between check, checkmate, and stalemate. Now, I'm not going to cover all of those in this video. That will be covered in the next video. But there are a fair number of questions that will ask you to understand the difference between check, checkmate, and stalemate. Make sure you understand the difference between all 3 of those. Here's another important tip. When you read the question, it will tell you whose turn it is to move. And that could make a really huge difference in how you answer the question. Read the question carefully and then make sure you know whose turn it is to move. And then take a look at the answers. A very good strategy when you're taking tests is to eliminate the answers that you know are not correct. That way, if you do have to guess, you'll only be guessing between things that you think might be right and not guessing from all 4 answers. So let's review. Step 1, read the question carefully. Step 2, read it again. Step 3, make sure you know whose turn it is. Step 4, make sure you understand the difference between check, checkmate, and stalemate. Okay. Step 5, many of the questions are going to ask you what is the best move? Well, what constitutes or what makes for a good move? I think that's a really good question. Generally speaking, you will want to look first for checkmates because that would end the game. That would be the very best move if a move results in checkmate. If it doesn't result in checkmate, you may want to look for moves that produce check. Checks are a very special move in that it requires your opponent to respond to the threat. For example, I may attempt to attack one of your pawns, but you don't necessarily have to defend the pawn, and you don't necessarily have to respond to my attack. But the moment that I place your king in check, you do have to respond to that threat. Otherwise, I could take your king and the game would be over. And that's not a good thing. So, to review, step 5 is first look for moves that might produce checkmate. If you don't see that, look for moves that produce a check. And if you don't see that, look for moves that result in you taking more material than your opponent. What we mean by material, I can explain right here in this particular position. It's white's move. If white were to take this pawn, white would gain 1 point because pawns are worth 1 point. We'll also cover this in the next video. Now, white has taken a pawn and has gotten 1 point, but black can now take the knight. Knights are worth 3 points. So in this particular case, we would say that black gained more material than white because white gained 1 pawn, which is worth 1 point, and black gained a knight, which is worth 3 points. 3 is bigger than 1, so black won more material. To review then, when you're asked about what is the best move for a position, step 1, look for checkmate. Step 2, look for checks. Step 3, look for gain of material. Generally speaking, that is as deep as the chess puzzles will go on the UIL test. Excellent. Let's make sure that we now understand all the things that we've talked about. Number 1, make sure that you understand algebraic notation. If it still seems a little confusing to you, talk with mom or dad and see if they can help explain it to you as well. Number 2, once you understand chess notation, algebraic notation, then turn your attention to some of the tips we gave you for the actual test. 1, read the question carefully. 2, make sure you know whose turn it is. 3, make sure you know the difference between check, checkmate, and stalemate. If you're asked about what is the best move, look first for checkmates, then for checks, then for gain of material. Finally, in order to make sure that you understand what material is, let me walk you through very briefly the point value for each of the pieces. Pawns, and I just highlighted one in the middle of the board, pawns are worth 1 point, okay? Knights, as I mentioned before, are worth 3 points. Let me go ahead and identify all of the knights. All 3 of those red pieces right there are worth 3 points. But guess what? Knights are not the only pieces that are worth 3 points, so are bishops. So let's turn those off and let's identify all the bishops. Bishops are also worth 3 points. Now, in another video, I will help explain the difference between open games and closed games. But what I would mention to you is that in open games, bishops are worth a little bit more. And in closed games, knights are worth a little bit more. But for the purpose of this video lesson, bishops are worth 3 points. Now, what about rooks? Rooks are right here. There's 4 of them. They're all worth 5 points. So rooks are worth more than bishops, and rooks are worth more than knights. Okay? Finally, we have queens. There's only 2 queens on the board. Queens are worth 9 points. Queens are the most powerful piece on the board, and that's how come they're considered to be worth 9 points. Okay, now I want you to put your thinking cap on. How much is a king worth? Well, if you still have your king, it's worth everything. And if you've been checkmated, it's worth nothing because the game is over. Therefore, it's extremely important when you play chess that you do your very best to keep your king safe. As long as you have him, it's invaluable. But the moment you're in checkmate, he's not worth anything and the game's over. Okay, I appreciate you taking some time to let me explain some tips that I think will help you when you do your UIL chess exam. As I've mentioned a couple times in this video, I'm going to do an additional video that will help cover some of the opening principles of chess. This might be helpful for those of you who are still learning the game. I would also mention to you that if you're looking to improve your game, you should consider looking at chess.com. In fact, the board that we're looking at right now is on chess.com. There are free memberships available on chess.com, and even better, Texas Tech University has a chess club, and you can join it. Talk to your teachers or your UIL representative to find out how you can be a member of our Texas Tech chess program here on chess.com. The great news is it doesn't cost anything. Now, for those of you that maybe want to improve a little bit more rapidly, chess.com does have different memberships available that will open up additional content. There are 3 different tiers on chess.com. The lowest tier is free, but there's a limited amount of content that you get. Still, you can play as many games as you like. The second tier opens up a little more content, including lessons and video lessons from grandmasters. And the very top tier unlocks all of the content, unlocks all of the videos by the grandmasters and all of the various lessons. It's a relatively low price to pay each month, given the amount of content that you are able to get access to. So talk with mom and dad, and if money's okay, maybe you can get one of the different tiers. But if not, let me stress to you, a beginning level membership on chess.com, which doesn't cost anything, is totally fine. The best way to get better at chess is to play chess. And the best way to get better at chess is to play people who are a bit better than you are. We oftentimes learn more in games that we lose than games that we win. Okay, well, I very much appreciate your time. I hope you do wonderful on the UIL exam, and I hope to see you in the next video. Until then, have a great night. I'm going to stop my share, and I'm going to say good night to you. Good night.